Peace be with you. What are these worms fussing about? What are they trying to achieve? So that their drafts of life will breed worms into pythons. The main news of Putin's madness. Maidan in Moscow. Putin changed the terms of the ceasefire and a major squabble in the Kremlin in today's edition. Subscribe, watch to the end, like, and think. Whatever you say, darkness will not obscure the light. Before we look at geopolitical news and move on to our sheep, here's the news and why I decided to bring it up first. So, watch. In Moscow, some strange people, tanned and dark-skinned, are organizing a Maidan. They don't care what's going on around them. They have rebar and building materials in their hands. They are someone and something. Perhaps there are already some details. That's not the point. Apparently, they were squabbling over something at the market, but in the center of Moscow, people are actually doing their job. They seem to be establishing their own order. They're solving things that don't suit them. While our boys are signing contracts, and Russian-speaking people are going to defend the Russian-speaking population in Donbass, in central Moscow, people are establishing their own order. I've already said more than once that I get the feeling that sometimes, it's the migrants who will soon take certain actions in Russia to at least start changing something. Because, well, no matter how you look at it, the gist of it is this. Some kind of group brawl is going on, truly lawless. Cars are being damaged, people are filming it all in shock, and there's not a single cop, not a single National Guard member, not a single government official in uniform nearby, no one. And look at this other interesting situation. No one's been arrested or jailed. No, maybe the next day, of course, there will be footage of public and private apologies. One by one, they'll pick someone out. But here's a precedent. So, kids in St. Petersburg sing and then get criminal charges. But here, guys, it's really like, well, in the 1990s, remember Putin saying, the guys have their own shootouts, they score, and then a brawl begins, only with sticks, stones, and some building materials. But what happens next is this, and the most interesting thing is that this is happening at exactly the right moment. Putin made this statement the other day.
Different countries are choosing different ways to respond to the demographic challenge, right down to effectively encouraging uncontrolled, yes, uncontrolled, even chaotic migration, displacing the indigenous population of a particular country.
He's probably not talking about Russia here, but in fact, he is talking about Russia. Again, we can, not go into details right now about who's right and who's wrong. The fact is, people are having a showdown in the center of Moscow. Some criminal or semi-criminal groups, are proving their case on the spot with stones and sticks. There are no cops, no National Guard. Meanwhile, our Russian-speaking boys are heading to Kobzone's concert. Again, if you don't believe me, go to your regions and see how many flags are flying and how many seats there are at Kobzone's concert. And Putin says, well, some countries are experiencing chaotic population replacement. Well, of course, he's not talking about Russia, but in fact, he's describing what's happening in Russia today. The indigenous population is being replaced, sacrificing their identity, their cultural distinctiveness, and, importantly, domestic political stability. Our choice is clear. This is global support for the family as a fundamental foundation. How can you support a family when one signs a contract and leaves? This guy gets his money right away, then she squanders it. He's at a Kobzone concert. According to the documents, they wrote him off as missing. And in Moscow, there's a redistribution going on, and not at all Russian-speaking boys. Absolutely all the faces there are defined. And this is what's happening at the front. Yesterday, we presented a book, which is, in essence, probably a direct document that sets out the ideological component of the decree. You and I are the troops of Jesus, the ideological component of Akhmet's special forces. We are the army of Jesus. From a religious perspective, this is complete idiocy, but no, it's not just idiocy, they're creating a black wave. This is the Russian world in cahoots with radical Islamists. And here they're preparing this ideology. What's most interesting is that he's distributing it to the Akhmetovites, who won't go to the front lines. Then they'll come to Moscow and lead these clans and establish their own order. And why did they bring Jesus into this? Well, because Russia is supposedly a somewhat orthodox country, but no such luck. The icing on the cake on this topic. Today, patrols from the Friendship of People's community have already appeared on the streets of Moscow. Members of the group, armed with pistols and wearing body armor, have begun patrolling the city. They're not Russian-speaking boys by any means, but they have guns. They're walking, they're patrolling, yes, they're already starting to rule the capital and maintain order. Maybe they, some of them, are doing good things. Some are bad. We're not talking about that now. We're talking about the demographic situation that Putin announced. He says, we have a different policy. We are raising families. What kind of families, if you, fellow migrants, already control Russia? I'm not talking about those migrants who arrive, work modestly, study, and strive for something. I'm talking about these rabid riffraff who come down from the mountains and want to command and control everything, drive Mercedes, have Russian girls. Well, basically, they're succeeding so far. Now let's get back to geopolitical sheep. Well, to comment on what this clown Dmitriev said at the negotiations in the US, that, supposedly, Ukraine is dragging it out, we'll mention that now, and then move on to his other statements. Special representative of the Russian Federation Dmitriev named the Kremlin's key conditions for ending the war in Ukraine. Attention, read on. Maybe something has changed, or maybe nothing has. He stated that a solution is possible subject to an agreement on security guarantees for Ukraine, which Russia is ready to discuss. Well, screw him, let's move on. The territorial issue in regions with a Russian-speaking population. And third, Ukraine's neutral status to ensure Russia's security. Perhaps this is taken out of context, perhaps, write in the comments, perhaps you have a more complete version. But I have a question, comrades, where are the 4 regions and Crimea? And where is our dominance? And where is the seizure of all the territories that we deem necessary? Where are the mirror responses? Where are the stunning ones? No, I'll talk about the stunning response later. So, it turns out that the Kremlin's rhetoric has already changed a little. It turns out, screw it, what we wrote into our constitution. Now the main thing is to agree on security, so that Russia is secure and Ukraine is secure. We are Russia, we will confirm Ukraine's security. Well, of course. But isn't it because the Oval Office has become a little overwhelmed by this situation? That's one thing, and secondly, the geese are flying, the migratory birds are flying, there's an oil refinery there, there's some kind of factory there. Svechnoy, there's some station there, the gasoline is running low. People are writing from different places and different factories. Maybe that also played a role. But the fact that he didn't say anything about the Donbass or Zaporizhia regions, some kind of incomprehensible sign or signal, don't you think? Well, as always, I couldn't get past this hypocritical mess. Of course, this is his quote from Dmitriev. Of course, Russia isn't targeting kindergartens. But many accidents happen. Any casualty is a great tragedy. That's why we want to end this conflict as quickly as possible. And the most interesting thing is that this is coming from the talking head of the side that started this war. That is, they're doing all this. And now they're saying, for us, this is a tragedy, you know? We want to end all of this as quickly as possible. The fact is that you want to end it all, because there's no money. The money is running out. We'll still talk about frozen assets today, so we want to end all of this. Then why are you sending us at all? Missiles? If you understand that something bad could happen, a missile going off course, or Ukraine's air defenses malfunctioning, why are you sending missiles at Ukraine? The bastards are keeping quiet about this. France is ready to send troops to Ukraine in 2026, stated the country's chief of staff, Pierre Schill. I say, don't rush, don't rush. 26th, 27th, 28th, like the second front during World War II. So, let's get there in 42, 43, maybe, because, well, what's the rush? There's no time, Kyiv didn't happen in 3 days, but Ukraine is standing its ground, it's not falling, so there's no need to rush. I couldn't help but show this footage. War is war, Russia is bombing Ukraine, but the food fair in Kyiv is on schedule. So, there are tents, people selling lard, some goods, agricultural produce, and then there's just smoke in the background and helicopters putting it all out. Just who are you trying to defeat? Well, who? Let's move on. This is a fantastic video. I'll play it for you now. This is Venezuelan President Maduro addressing Donald Trump in English, repeating phrases several times. Enjoy. You. Know why I like this video now? I won't get into Venezuela, the US, or who's on whose side. That's not the point. Putin would have been shouting exactly the same thing 3 months into the war if Western partners, Oval Offices, rectangular offices of all sorts, had imposed proper, effective sanctions, as they should have. And they had provided. There was no need to send in troops. They had at least provided Kyiv with everything it needed to defend its territory. I bet in 2 months Putin would be sitting in the Kremlin saying, no war, no, only peace, only peace, only peace. We are for peace. We Russians have always been for peace.
Please,
don't let them put a stop to his actions. And all this time he thought he'd gotten away with everything he did and will get away with this. That's why he's still tinkering, even though the conditions have changed a bit. Well, the filth that. Well, I kept expecting it, but they certainly did well with this statement. In the State Duma of the Russian Federation, they accused Nabiullina, and here, pay attention, do you know what they accused her of? Financing the armed forces of Ukraine. Deputy Mironov stated that responsibility for the transfer of frozen assets to Ukraine lies personally with the head of the central bank. They're certainly doing well. Listen, they're doing well. How's that possible? Can you imagine the level of clan infighting going on? A deputy openly accuses Nabiullina, who's truly pulling the Russian economy back, saving it, and has repeatedly tried to sack it, but Putin won't let her go. It's just rumors, of course, but in reality, thanks to her efforts, she's still managing to balance things out. It's certainly going downhill, but at least it's still managing to balance somehow. And then he comes out and says, so you're the one funding the Ukrainian armed forces. He keeps saying that. He showed me, he says, but I didn't show him. No, he did. And the money will go to Ukraine, and our boys will be sent to Kobzone's concert using Russian money. And who's to blame? Nabiullina, of course. But here's another interesting piece of news. God willing, it'll be confirmed. The US is preparing new sanctions against Russia. The Trump administration is developing additional restrictions on key sectors of the Russian economy, including banks and oil exports, Reuters reports. This is exactly what I already mentioned. What should have been done on the 3rd day of the war? No, not the 3rd, the 2nd. By the 3rd, it would have been too late. It should have been done by the 2nd. But my buns. And here just yesterday I showed a clown who said, yes, Russia has weaned itself off the oil needle. I always enjoy it when the manuals don't have time to get through. The situation has changed, and the broadcast needs to be recorded.
Regarding the decline in oil profits, this is a fundamental issue. Within the framework of the Russian budget deficit, and war is an expensive affair, they are deliberately and systematically squeezing this money out of our country.
So it turns out that this woman, in what, 10 seconds, actually concocted several articles for herself, discrediting and so on. Not only do we have no money, we have a budget deficit, we are also dependent on petrodollar oil and gas revenues, and they, he says, are depriving us of that. Comrades, so decide, has Russia weaned itself off the oil needle or is it still a little bit on it and fidgeting back and forth? Well, of course, he's sitting there fidgeting. And here's another point. Reuters also writes there. Washington has begun an internal discussion about using Russian Federation assets in the United States to support Ukraine. This is one of those situations, you know, where a negative turns into a positive. We've often criticized the money, the great czar of a great country. He knows how to make it and he knows how to count it. And here they're telling him, listen, there's no need to help Ukraine at all. No need to invent anything, man, it's right here. You take it and send it, or rather, you take it, buy whatever you need and send it to Ukraine. And that's all he needs. And if he's truly convinced of this, the situation will be oh so interesting. That's precisely why Putin just sent Dmitry Dmitriev Pedashok away, saying, no, we're ready to end it all. We, every tragedy, every victim, of course, we want to end it. That's why Putin called Trump before his meeting with Zelensky. Just don't go to such extreme measures, because it turns out the time isn't even needed for tomahawks yet. We'll take Russian money and buy them. There are many other points that are necessary for successful military operations. And even if they are implemented, it won't be easy. But I was wondering why the European Union is stalling on transferring these frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Well, of course, it's bureaucracy, I mentioned that. But here's an interesting point that comes up. Belgium intends to receive 1.2 billion euros per year from the frozen Russian Federation assets for its military budget in the form of taxes on the income from their reinvestment, according to Western publications. This is one of the reasons why Prime Minister Bart De Wever refused to support the expropriation of Russian funds blocked on the Euroclear platform. In other words, he's saying, well, we can't take Russian funds, we can't. Well, it's not exactly a good idea, but why? Because we're feeding off that budget. Well, the question is certainly complex and interesting, but here's the most surprising thing. Who's losing anyway? The Kremlin is losing, because, well, it's no secret anymore that Europe is truly preparing for war. Factories are being built, production is being launched, and training is underway with Ukraine on how to wage war in the 21st century, because no one else, neither in Europe nor in NATO, knows how to do it, really. And so Europe is preparing, and whose money is it preparing for? Russia's, so that they can send our boys to a Cobzone concert. So, such a great, brilliant geopolitician has outplayed everyone. And who isn't having fun? And aren't these cemetery buildings with Russian flags flying on them having fun? The peace summit in Budapest will take place, Orban declared. He noted that under Trump's leadership, deals are being made, while Europe is engaged in moralizing and could end up as an observer. Of course, there's some truth in his words, but after reading this, my first thought was like a deaf mute telling a blind man, we'll see. It's the same story here. Yeah, we'll see, and there's no need to go far. The director of the military plastics plant, where 12 people died yesterday thanks to Putin's special military operation, told his relatives that the most important thing is fulfilling the state defense order. Not your serval faces in black scarves howling. That's not the most important thing. Not specifically. The most important thing is fulfilling the state defense order. That's the most important thing for you. That's all you have left. But they're already openly saying, well, you're just dirt, from which we're still trying to knead something, a great empire, although it's no longer working. We need to pay attention to the RGS funds and to companies developing and training artificial intelligence. Only by relying on our culture, history, linguistic richness, and traditions, and traditional values, we will be able to create truly sovereign models of artificial intelligence, rather than copying other people's solutions, which leads to both technological and ideological dependence, and ultimately, to the loss of sovereignty. So tell me, how can you even talk about sovereign artificial intelligence? Not only does the word sovereign have nothing to do with artificial intelligence, but screw it. How can you even talk about artificial intelligence when you don't produce anything in your own country? In fact, it's not me, Valuka Matvienko recently said, we don't have our own nails, but we do have artificial intelligence. No, what they've learned to do, albeit poorly, is block the internet. People write to me en masse. Mobile isn't working, Wi-Fi isn't working, white lists. You can watch this, you can't watch that. They're really putting pressure on the entire country from all sides. He says, well, we'll have our own sovereign artificial intelligence, we can use it. You know, people send me this too, saying, well, write something, and a new one will pop up. Well, it's been like this for a long time, and everyone understands perfectly well that it's different. You know, this has already been told to me as a joke, but it's not a joke, it was a real story. When it was written on a piece of paper, they brought him to the police station, they write to him for defamation, and he says, so, wait, what does the president have to do with this? Insulting the president. And they tell him in the police station, what, you think we don't know who we have, does that say it all? No, he comes out and talks about artificial intelligence, while people, again, write to me in batches. They're cutting back, firing people at oil and gas companies, limiting take-home pay at gas stations, 30 liters. But no, he says, we will have our own sovereign artificial intelligence. That's the level of intelligence, or rather, again, we can repeat, in Russia, over 300 people are declared terrorists and extremists every month. In 2 years, the list has doubled, from 1,500 to over 3,000 names a year. Among them, teenagers are increasingly common, even under 16. Once on the registry, a person loses their bank accounts, credit cards, and the ability to work. If people have already calculated this, by 2063, the entire population of the Russian Federation will be terrorists and extremists, including infants and members of United Russia. You know, you can believe some things there, and not believe others. That's kind of it, but I think so. It's not so clear-cut, but when you're shown the numbers, when in, 40 years, your entire population will be extremists and optimists, or rather pessimists, then you can't go against the numbers, because they're genuinely afraid. They're trying to sweep everyone under the rug. Even those who've already completed their military service are starting to receive electronic summonses. Well, here, like Tarik and Stalin, a terrible mistake was made. They've completed their service, and now it's time to go. CP, the state wasted a whole year on you for nothing. No, my friend, work it off. Like in the last video with the drones, you trained for free, now get to the trenches. Don't tell us fairy tales here. The money was spent on you, work it off. In Kazan, unknown assailants attacked a convoy in Sin and freed a conscript being transported in a car. And such stories are becoming more and more common, with their own freeing their own. VSN, not in Sin. Well, people have different abilities, they have different talents. Here, apparently, people put all this to good use. I won't go into details about the streets where it happened. If anyone is interested, find it and read it. I'm telling you the gist of it, as it is. By the way, this footage is a Ukrainian Humvee, or some kind of American military SUV in the Evil Hedgehog modification. This is Donbass. And I often get comments, well, not often, but sometimes they write, saying, why are you making fun of Russian military equipment when so much of it is cobbled together, welded together, when it's so ugly? And do the Ukrainians use it too? Yes, absolutely. But there's one difference. And you need to remember this, if you have a third-grade brain. Who called themselves the second army in the world? Who wanted to take the capital of a neighboring state in 3 days? When you make such a claim, be kind enough to live up to it. And, of course, Ukraine attacked. And when Ukraine does that, it adapts to survive, to cobble together something from, and sticks. It can do that. And there's nothing to laugh about. It was attacked. And you're looking for different solutions to win, which is simply wiping Russian-speaking cities off the face of the earth. And when the world's second largest army, you're talking about sovereign artificial intelligence, like a bald man, but you have no equipment, no evacuation, no assault weapons, then, of course, a question arises, and I'm talking about this and will continue to talk about it. At the airport, wow, they've imposed a flight restriction. 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. I'm starting to get a little confused about how this is possible. We have the best air defense in the world, but 1,700 kilometers from Ukraine, and they're imposing a flight restriction, because someone else has flown in, some geese or migratory birds, whoever was there. How can you expect the world's second largest army to protect a great country when they have to restrict flights who knows where, because the SVO, comrades, is underway? Russian Defense Minister Belousov says, the capture of the drone force in the DPR was a serious step toward achieving the goals of the SVO. And again, these are just small numbers. We believe it or not, just numbers. The population of Dronovka, according to the 2001 census, was 613. And that was 2001, because in Ukraine, too, many people have been and continue to leave their villages, heading for the big cities. So, by 22, there were probably about 300 people living there. And now the defense minister of the Second Army of the world's greatest empire comes out and says, we've captured the drone force, damn it. Victory tomorrow. Victory tomorrow. As they used to say, victory will definitely be in 2 months. Victory for our grandfathers. Hooray. Comrades. But this is the level. This is the level. Make sure you show this to the Zedovites, because, even if you support the SVO, you support Putin, you adore him. How can the Minister of Defense boast about capturing a village with a population of 300? How is this mind-boggling? But it's mind-boggling in any normal country. When you live in this aura of constant lies and idiocy, it somehow manages to coexist in someone's mind. Russians have lost faith in a bright future. And yet, according to FOM poll, only 27% believe the year will get better in the next 6 months. This is the minimum level of the initial SVO, and sociologists are noting a phase of serious disillusionment. There's one thing I can't understand. What do Russians have to be disillusioned about? The special is going according to plan. The economy is growing. By some indicators, we're second, third, fourth in Europe. Everything is fine. Sovereign artificial intelligence, the internet, so that people don't watch all that nasty stuff, is being turned off. Well, there are layoffs. But overall, why is faith in a bright future being lost? And look, what an interesting point. Even if you support all this Putin filth, I'm talking about his international and, most importantly, domestic policies, you still go to stores, you still interact with people, even if you're a complete idiot. There are so many factors that really make you scream, man, use your brain, man, look where you are, what you're wearing, and how you live. And so, you lose faith. But again, that's just a myth. The real figures are completely different. Putin reported a dramatic drop in customs duties to the budget. The Federal Customs Service transferred 4.5 trillion rubles to the Russian budget, and this year's total collection is planned at 5.9 trillion rubles, said FCS head Valery Pikolayov. Compared to last year, customs duties will be down 19%. So what's going on? Sanctions are only beneficial. People buy everything from us. There should be more money, but for some reason it's running low. Even the great geopolitician himself, for whom everything is going according to plan, admits, money is running a little short, but I think they can handle cutting off the internet so that people can't get even the slightest adequate or semi-adequate information. Russia will not cede Japan or the Kuril Islands to Japan, stated Deputy Zuravlev Sharapakalub. According to him, trade continues even without a peace treaty, and talk of transferring territories is out of the question. The new Japanese Prime Minister is trying to restore imperial influence, despite the country's de facto occupation by the United States, the deputy added. I won't delve into geopolitical nuances now. I'll say one thing. If tomorrow the Japanese guys, who are also watching all this, decide to take these islands, they will literally take them in 3 days. They will literally take them in 3 days. Of course, there's no place to call to reserve tables in a restaurant in the Kuril Islands, because, well, anyone who lives there will tell you what the standard of living is like there. But the fact that they can take it all, and do it all at once, even faster than they once took Crimea. You walk in, you take it, and there won't be any resistance. I'm not even talking about the local population. The local population will be grateful. We'll have roads, we'll have Japanese cars, we'll have gasoline, we'll have food. We'll simply live like normal people, like in Japan. No, we won't become oligarchs. We'll simply live like normal people. I'm talking about military units, garrisons of some kind. There won't be anyone to guard them, because all our Russian-speaking boys are heading to Kobzone's concert in the North Military District. So all this bravado is based on one thing: they won't risk it. But if someone did take the risk, everything would fall apart. Russian doctors and paramedics will be able to prescribe dietary supplements to patients if there are medical indications. The list of supplements will be approved by the Ministry of Health and Rospotrebnadzor based on their quality, effectiveness, and compliance with the Eurasian Economic Union's technical regulations. Well, first of all, they'll prescribe dietary supplements, some ours and some not, to make money. It's obvious how these contracts are signed and permits are issued. Quote, I'll give it to you, but I won't give it to you. Well, I'll make money here, that's obvious. But do you know why they're allowing dietary supplements? It's not because the Russian, well, Ministry of Health has hired smart people. They've figured things out and understand it's best for the country. No, they're simply running out of pills, there's nothing to treat them with, and now they can at least slip in some pills and make money. That's the only question. Fuel sales restrictions are being lifted in Crimea, said Regional Governor Sergun Oksonov. Can you imagine how everything must go according to plan for people in the region to be proud of the fact that restrictions are being lifted here? Can you imagine? Maybe this was also one of the goals of this special military operation? Well, then we succeeded. And now, the icing on the cake. That same stunning weapon I spoke of, the one Putin voiced and frightened everyone with. In Russia, they called for a ban on the sale of water abroad. Members of the Green Party declared that the country's water resources should be used to solve domestic problems. And here's what the plan was. Quote, we won't sell you water, he said. You'll have nothing to drink, and you'll understand that our country is the greatest. And the fact that the Chinese are pumping this water straight from Lake Baikal with pipes, who's going to talk about that? The fact that lakes, rivers, and reservoirs where people used to come are really drying up. They sent me a message, saying, I used to come here, swim with my grandmother, she walked with the cow, I swam. Now it's all desert. Desert. Who cares about this? Why is it necessary? This is the real answer to the West. They are afraid. See you later.